and he died drowning in his own blood a couple of minutes later. He was 20 years old. Over a lousy pizza. The sudden, senseless death of an innocent human being. The overwhelming grief of a family. The total confusion as you try to absorb a new, hideous reality. I can tell you, I've never, ever felt pain like that. And I know many of you have experienced pain. I have too, but not like that. It's very complicated, I think, for parents to hear their children die before they do. Is usually the other way around. And it felt very unnatural for me to bury my own son. And I still remember, even though it was 12 years and 10 months ago, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is I had to call his mother. I live here in San Diego, and Tariq's mother lived in Seattle. So it was too far. I had to do this on the phone. And Tariq was very close to his mother, as I am to my mother. Many of you are probably very close to your mothers. You know, you have a very special relationship. And how do you tell a mother, that she's never going to see her son again? Or hear him laugh? Give him a hug. And Tariq was our only son. We had a beautiful daughter, but he was our only son. And I still remember when she found out, she fell to the floor with a loud, piercing shriek. And she found out that Tariq had been shot and killed. And even though this was over 12 years ago, I can hear her scream in my inner ear today as I speak to you. And I probably will for the rest of my life. So that's the first point I want to make, is that violence is real. Violence is very painful. That violence hurts very deep. That violence scars the soul. And sometimes it scars it forever. That as real human beings, if we could only understand that the pain that is caused by violence, I don't believe that we would be violent. So why am I here? A very busy life. And there are really only two reasons I'm here. One is every one of you in this room is very important. You are young, you have a future, and you can make a difference. And I speak to kids all over the country because, yes, every one of you is a very important person. That's the first reason. The second reason is I don't want, and I know there are many adults in this room that work with you on a daily basis, social workers. They do that because they love to work with kids. Social workers don't get a lot of money. I can tell you that because I used to make a lot of money as an investment banker till my son died. My rate was $300 an hour. It's a lot of money, right? For 1 hour. Social workers make $15 an hour, $20 an hour. That's what I do now. I'm a social worker too. Because it's not for the money. I can go be an investment banker. These people that you see in here, that are here every day, are not here because they're making a lot of money. They're there because they care. And they care for you. They don't want you dead, as I don't want you dead like my son. And they don't want you in prison for life, like Tony. Tony is a young man in an adult prison for life. And that's the two reasons why I am here. Is A, you're very important, and B, I don't want any one of you to die or end up in prison for life. How many here have lost family members as a result of violence, like I did? Listen. Many of you have lost family members, so you know some of the pain that I'm talking about. And those of you who haven't lost anybody, that have not gone through this pain, I can tell you that this pain is, I cannot even have words to describe as I go through my life how difficult it is, because you know there are holidays and birthdays and anniversaries and Christmas and family gatherings, and there's always this one person missing. It never really leaves it. Now I took a little bit of a different response to this tragedy. Sure, I had compassion for my son, but someplace in my heart I felt compassion for the 14-year-old who took my son's life. I felt empathy for him. And I really didn't realize, till that time, I was very busy traveling the world. A lot of my work was international. And I didn't even realize there were gangs, youth gangs. So I started to look into this, and I asked some very basic questions, like, why do kids join gangs? And the answers I got horrified me. They're told they join gangs because they want to be respected, like I'm a tough guy. There is no toughness in violence. Martin Luther King Jr. is a tough guy. Gandhi was a tough guy. Gandhi wasn't very strong and had no muscles, but he was able to forgive. It takes a lot more to forgive than to strike back. Or I was told they joined gangs to get a sense of belonging. Tony was born to a 15-year-old. So in many ways, she was a child herself. His father was also about 15 years old and didn't want him. And they met 3 times, and his father beat him up all of those 3 times. Tony was very angry that his father was never in his life. When he was 9 years old, his mother decided that he should stay and live with his grandfather, and you met the grandfather on the video, because it was too dangerous for him to live up in LA. So he was sent to live with his grandfather when he was 9 years old. When he was 8 years old, his favorite cousin was murdered in machine gun fire in Los Angeles. He was seduced by his uncle's girlfriend. And then I was told sometimes kids join gangs for protection. You know, we have a lot of gangs, the Hispanic gangs that fight with African American gangs, that fight with Asian gangs, that fight with white gangs. So they join gangs for protection because they don't join this gang. They live in areas where they are targeted by this gang. And this did not make sense to me. You know, we are the United States of America. We are the richest country in the world, by far. America has more money than the rest of the world put together. We can do anything we want. Maybe what's lacking is a national will. And I didn't think it was right that our kids join gangs to get respect or belonging or for protection. I thought we needed to do more. So our kids don't have to join gangs. So 9 months after Tariq died, I started the foundation, which is named after my son. It's called the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, TKF. It's our website. And I reached out in forgiveness to the grandfather and guardian of my son's killer. And we worked together. And we have been together now for 12 years. But I still remember that first meeting that I had with him. I was introduced by the district attorney. And I told him when I met him, I come to you in the spirit of forgiveness. I'm not here because I want revenge, retribution, or angry. Because what I see is both you and I lost a son on that fatal night. My son died, and your grandson went to adult prison for life. And I have looked into this problem because it's very complicated for our kids to grow up. It's very difficult out there, I know, much more difficult than when I was your age. And I told him that I started this foundation. And the purpose of the foundation, I told his name is Ples. I said, the purpose of the foundation is to make sure that our kids and young adults like yourselves do not join gangs. That they don't make the choices that Tony did, choices that your grandson did. And I basically asked him, I said, Ples, I can't do this job by myself. You know, you are tied to me because this tragedy involves my son and your grandson. And it was your grandson that took the life of my son. It behooves us, me and you, it behooves us not to make sure that no other kid makes the same fatal choices as your grandson did. Will you help me? That was what I told him. And he was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. And he has a very good job. Ples has a master's degree in urban development. He works for the city of San Diego as an enterprise manager. Had a home not far from here in Lemon Grove. And had a nice home for his grandson. And loved his grandson, still loves his grandson. And I am Muslim and Ples is Christian. He's African American and my roots are Eastern. And I would never have met him had his grandson not killed my son. And he's as close to me as my own brother because of forgiveness. He's met my entire family. We work together. We've talked to 500,000 kids live, like yourselves. We often go to dinner together. I've met his whole family. And hopefully he can come and speak to you too, because he does go out and speak, and he's a good speaker. I think it'd be good to invite him, and you can hear his part of the story. But because there's forgiveness, we both changed. Tony is also changed. He does this work as I do now. And this has become our passion. And we've committed our lives to make sure that no other kid ends up dead like my son or in prison for life. 5 years after the tragedy, I went and met Tony. At that time he was in a prison called New Folsom. He's in Pelican Bay now. But before that he was in New Folsom when I met him. And I still remember thinking, you know, I'm not going to like this kid. You know, he murdered my one and only son as I was going up to the prison to meet him. You really don't know how you're going to react when you come eyeball to eyeball with the person who shot somebody you love, you know, like your son or a family member. You don't know how you're going to react. And when I met him, I was very surprised. You know, he didn't have the attitude of a typical 19-year-old, you know, the bravado, the language, the sway. In fact, he was very soft-spoken. He was very well-behaved. He was remorseful. He was a likable kid. I think if you walked in the door right here, I think all of you would feel the same. And I looked into his eyes. I was sitting very close to him, like I am to you. And I looked into his eyes. And I looked into his eyes very deeply, and I did not see a murderer in him. I couldn't look into his eyes and say, you know, he's a murderer. What I saw was another soul, much like me and much like all of you here. And not only have I forgiven him, I also told him, when you come out, Tony, you can come and you have a job at the foundation, and you can work with your grandfather and me. Would that be powerful? Yes? Yeah. When he's on stage? And I think Tony would, if he was on stage, if he was with me right now, I think he would tell you that he joined a gang when he was 11. He killed my son when he was 14. He would tell you he spent the last umpteen years in prison. And he would tell you he's not worth it. But he can't, you know, you can't turn the clock back. He would like to. But he ran away from home that day to join his homeboys that he thought were his friends. And they were the first one. After he shot Tariq, they ran back to the house because Antoine, who was the leader, said, "Run, run, run, don't drop the gun." And they all ran back to the house. As soon as they got back to the house, his homeboys are looking at him and saying, you know, "Why did you shoot the pizza delivery man?" You see what's happening here? The body is down. Somebody is going to have to pay for it. He was right, his homeboys, and says, "We were not the shooters. There is the shooter." You think those homeboys visit him in prison? They don't care for him. His grandfather visits him, I visit him, his mother visits him. All those homeboys, they don't care. And they didn't want to go to adult prison, so they were able to avoid it. But Tony, when I offered him a job and said, "Okay, Tony, I forgive you. Now I want to offer you a job. You can come and work for the foundation." And I think he had to think and say, well, I can't be out there being in a gang and living a life of violence when the foundation teaches forgiveness and love. He had to change, and he has. In Pelican Bay, he's in a SHU. That means 22 hours out of 24 hours, he's in a cell. He gets 2 hours outside the cell, and they shackle him. Right? Wrist and ankles, and he has to hop him out. Can't even walk. And they hop him back in. And even in those conditions, he somehow reads 5 books a month. He studies his GED. There's no school like you guys have school here. There's no school for him. He has to self-study. And he passed his GED 2 years ago. not only passed it, he aced it. 60 percentile. Pretty smart kid. His dream was to be a doctor. Tony, I can tell you, smarter to be a doctor. Because he didn't think there are enough doctors in the African American culture. And that is true. There are not enough doctors in the African American culture. Can he be a doctor today? Can he? As they watch him. Even when he comes out, they're watching for the rest of his life. One mistake, it's over. He's back in life, never come out. So the choices we make are very important. It's okay. We've all made mistakes. Tony made a very big mistake. He took somebody's life. He was very abused as a kid too. His father beat him up. It's important to take responsibility for our action. In this video, you heard him say, I shot and killed Tariq Kamisa, a person I did not know who was not doing anything wrong to me. That's important to take responsibility. It's not your father's fault or your mother's fault or your cousin's fault or your gangbanger's fault. We make choices. I'm responsible for my choices. You're responsible for your choices. Tony's responsible for his choices. And he took responsibility. He didn't say I was, forced to do this because the 18-year-old told me to kill it. He said, I shot and killed Tariq Kamisa. That's important, to take responsibility. We've all made mistakes. I have too. The important thing is to take responsibility. The second thing is, you also see him on the tape. I pray to God that Mr. Kamisa would forgive me for the pain that I've caused him. Now, I'd already forgiven him when he asked for that forgiveness, but it made me feel good that he actually did ask for my forgiveness. So when we hurt somebody, it is important to ask for forgiveness, to make an apology. And then it is important to forgive yourselves. I'm helping Tony. Even though I have forgiven him, it's very difficult for him to forgive himself. I'm helping him with that. Because it is important when all of you are very young, you have a very full life. And you can contribute very significantly. And Tony will too, as we talked about. When he joins the foundation, he'll be very powerful, right? He'll be telling kids about his story. And when he tells the kids about his story, he's going to be able to make sure that other kids, because of his story, won't make the decisions he did. Like join gangs. Like the day he shot my son, he drank a lot of alcohol, smoked a lot of marijuana. He talks about that. So he's going to be able to give back, and that's what all of you can do. From my experience, I teach forgiveness now. Not only to kids, I also teach forgiveness to adults. I've written one book, which I have 2 copies. I'm going to leave it here as a gift for you. I'll just finish my 2nd book, and I'm on my 3rd book. Because I can help other people. So all of us that are having experiences, and many of you have gone through a lot, and I know that. It's important to take responsibility, ask for forgiveness to the people you've hurt, forgive yourselves, and give back. Help another kid just like yourself, and hopefully they will not make the same mistake, and then your life is really being very worthwhile. That's what I do. It's about serving each other. That's why we're here. We're all here to serve each other, to serve humanity. This is why many of the adults in these rooms do this on a daily basis. Because they love you, and they care about you, and they want to serve. I was told you have many questions. Who has questions?
guys. Now's the time. You had questions last week.
You have a question? Go ahead.
First, she thought about when you heard the son got killed. What came to your mind?
Yeah, well, the question is what came to my mind the first time I heard it. I didn't believe it. I thought they made a mistake. Because I don't think, as a father, as a parent, you can believe that your son died. It was from the police. I got a call from the coroner's office. So I was sure they made a mistake, and I quickly hung up the phone, and I called his house. He had just moved in with his girlfriend. His girlfriend's name was Jennifer. I think you saw a picture of him on there. They just moved in together 6 weeks because they're engaged and they plan to get married. And Jennifer answered the phone, and she was just crying. She couldn't say anything because they went to his house first, the police, and then they told her. So she knew about it before they came to my house. And she was just crying, and that's when it hit me. And I knew it was true. And it literally felt like a nuclear bomb had gone off my heart. I remember that the pain was so intense. I left my body. I still remember, my body drained, like life drained out of me. I never had an out-of-body experience. That was the first time. I left my body. And I happen to believe in God. So I left my body and I went, I believe, in the arms of God. And He held me for the longest time. And my body was still down there. And when the explosion subsided, He sent me back to my body with the vision that there were victims at both ends of the gun, which is very surprising because an hour and a half after, I don't have family in San Diego, I live by myself. So my best friend was with me. His name is Dan. And Kit, his wife, went to get Jennifer. She was by herself because her parents lived in Hawaii. And Dan and I were alone, and he was my best friend. And he says to me, whoever these kids are that killed Tariq, I hope they fry in hell. And I looked at him, I said, I don't feel that way. I see victims at both ends of the gun. And he started to cry. He says, where do you get this strength? He says, because Dan and Kit have a son too. His name is Adam. He was 12 years old then. He's 24 years old now. Dan told me if somebody took Adam's life, I would not only kill the killer, I would want to kill the whole family. Where do you get this strength? And he's not a violent person. So it was very interesting that I didn't feel that way even an hour and a half later. So who wants to know what happened to Jennifer? So after Tariq died, Jennifer never really was able to deal with him. She became a heroin addict. Very, very bad drug. I'm sure you've heard of heroin, right? Mm-hmm. And then she moved to the Bay Area. She couldn't live here because there was too many things that reminded her about my son. And then she was able to kick the heroin habit, and she moved to Seattle where her parents lived. But then she went back to drugs and back and forth. And 7 years after Tariq died, she committed suicide. She's no longer with us. She killed herself with him. Yes.
How long were they engaged? Like how long were they together?
About 6 weeks. They were together for 2.5 years. But they engaged just 6 weeks before she passed. It's very tough for her. And I really would not have found out about her suicide, but she used to write to me, every year I would get something around Christmas and I'd write her back. But I hadn't heard from her for a couple of years, and I was wondering. And she stayed in touch with my daughter and Tariq's mom, but mostly she wrote to me because she I knew her well because Tariq was at school here, and they spent a lot of time at my house. You know, Tariq had the keys, so when I was going for the weekend, they usually stayed at my house. Usually there was beer in the fridge, and you know, they were together, and they loved my place. So you know, she was like a daughter to me. But then Bruce called me. You know, I just found out about Jennifer's suicide less than a year ago, because he called me and he said, I want to know where Tariq's grave is. And I thought, after all of these years, you know, why would you want to know where Tariq's grave is? And the first thing I asked him, I said, is Jennifer okay? I haven't heard from her. He said, no, as in she didn't make it. I said, what happened? So she committed suicide 2 years ago. And next week is Jennifer's birthday, 30th birthday. And the happiest time in her life was when she was dating your son. And we cremated her. You know what cremation means? Yeah. And we want to sprinkle the ashes on your son's grave. This is why I'm calling you, because I want to know where your son's grave is. I said, Bruce, why did you not call me? Why did you wait 2 years? He says, I couldn't call you. You know, you already lost a son. I know you love Jennifer as a daughter. I just did not have the heart to call you and break your heart. It's very sad. Yes.
How did she kill herself?
Overdose on drugs. She knew a lot about drugs. Took them 2 days to find her. I can't still believe that. You know, she was in an apartment by herself, and nobody even knew for 2 days that she was on the floor of her apartment. Yes.
How did Tony get apprehended by the police?
Question is, how did Tony get apprehended by the police? Good question. What happened is, when this tragedy hit, I belong to another organization, much like Reflections. This organization is called Child Safety Network Trust. Because even when my son was alive, most of my life was about being an investment banker, but I always did some work in charities because I always believed in giving back. So, you know, part of my time I was on boards and I worked with organizations that are children, and one of them was the Child Safety Network Trust. And the executive director, or the manager of this particular organization, went on television because a lot of work we did there was about keeping kids safe. So he went on television saying, if anybody knows about this tragedy, says the person who died is the son of one of our board members, because I was on his board. Please call us. If you don't want to call the police, please call us. And there was a girl in the gang, okay, who had actually made the phone call to order the pizzas. They actually called Domino's Pizza first, but they were closed. And they called Domino's because they delivered later. She called, not the police, but the manager of this organization where I was on the board. And she talked to Melody, who was the assistant there. And she told Melody, I know who killed Mr. Kanisa's son. And then they met her, and they convinced her to tell the police. So the murder happened on a Saturday in January of 1995. By Wednesday, all 4 of the kids were apprehended. Let's talk about what happened to her. She had to leave town. Why? Why did she have to leave town?
Because she snitched on the gang, and then like the other gang members, and the gang would shoot her, kill her,
Do you know about the Witness Protection Program?
Yeah.
You know about that? So she actually had to change her name, change her look, and they put her, they send it to Kansas. She just actually called me 10 months ago. And she said, I'm the girl that ordered the pizza, you know about me. I'm back in San Diego, I have a little girl now. And I knew you would forgive me because you forgave Tony. I don't want to have my little girl have the experience of being in a gang. Can I come and volunteer for the foundation? I said, of course you can. For 12 years, her family was here. She was living in Kansas. Okay. Who has other questions?
I know last week some of the children asked me why Tony's in both bands.
Yes, good questions. So how many of you want to know why Tony is in Pelican Bay? It's a very scary place, you know? Prisons are zoos, okay? Prisons are heavily discriminated. Heavily discriminated. The African Americans do not talk to Hispanic people. You would never see anything like this. They don't talk to white people, they don't talk to Asian. They stay very separate. I want you to know that first. When I went to meet Tony, I remember I was in a big room, little coffee tables, and Tony and his grandfather and I were sitting on one, and there were many other coffee tables in this room where, you know, the inmates, the prisoners were visiting with their family members. And this one young came to our table because I brought some chocolates and candy for Tony because I know he liked chocolates and candy. So this little girl was maybe 2 years old, so I offered her some of the candies and the chocolates. And Tony told me, Azim, please don't do that because I could get into trouble. Because we don't talk. African Americans don't mix with the Hispanics or the whites or the Asians. We have no connection because every single day in prison, people die. There are many fights. And what happened to Tony is he was with a cellmate. And the cellmate that he was with was given a life sentence without parole. It's like they call a lifer. Does that make sense? When you get a life sentence, it's two ways. You can have life in prison with parole, which is what Tony gets. So he has a chance to get out. Doesn't mean he gets out, but he will because I support him. And he won't get out till he's 46 years old, and he was 14 when he went. How many years is that? 32, thank you. Good math student here. So think about it, 14 years, and now he has to serve 32 years. Hopefully he'll get out. Or you can get a life sentence, no parole, and they call him lifer. So this kid that was with him, studied in care, they attacked a guard at New Folsom where he was. They found 2 knives. So they automatically assumed that one knife was a person that attacked the guard who was white. Tony's black. The other knife must belong to Tony. He still claims that he did not attack him, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know what? I believe Tony. So they gave him a choice because they don't have court systems in the prison. They have tribunals, okay? So they gave him a choice that if you plead not guilty and the tribunal finds you guilty, we will add 30 years to your prison sentence. You already had 25 years, right? 25 years to life. They'll add 30 more. How many is that?
85.
How many?
85.
55, right? 25 plus 30.
After it's about 60.
Second? Oh, you go to what, 60 now. So about 25 plus 35. 30 is 55, right? So he would then have to serve 55 years. How old would he be then? He was 14. 69. Another good math student. By the way, my degree is in math, so I love math. Comes through, right? Or they told him if he would plead guilty, that he was responsible, they would add 10 years. So Tony decided that he really didn't have a chance. He's an African American in a prison, and the guard was white, and so was the tribunal. He didn't think his odds were very good that they would not find him guilty. So he took the 10 years. And they moved him to Pelican Bay. Now, because he aced his GED, he's out of the chute. He's doing college courses in child psychology. He reads 5 books a month. He loves Greek mythology, which I do too. And I don't go visit him as much as I used to because very far. Pelican Bay is by the Oregon borders. You have to take 2 flights and rent a car. It takes a whole day to get there. And then you can only visit him for an hour and to come back. So we write to each other. And we write all the time. So he's tracking. He's studying very hard, and I look forward to when he can join us. Because I think he can make a much bigger difference working for us. You agree with that? Than spending time in prison, right? I hope that that happens. Maybe some of you might choose to write to me. We get a lot of letters. Every time I speak at school, I get so many letters. Some come to me, some go to his grandfather, some go to Tony. And some go to my son, who is no longer with us, but I like to read those. If you're inspired, maybe the teachers can help you do some writing. You know? And maybe you can write to Tony, because there's not much hope in prisons. When I write, I always want to give him some hope, you know? Because he's important, just like every one of us. Yes?
So he's going to serve all of his time over there in Pelican Bay, or is he going to get out of there, or what?
Second?
Is he going to serve all his time at Pelican Bay, or is he what?
Well, the question is he going to serve all of his time in prison? Is he going to get out or what? It's a tough question. I have written to our very famous governor. Who's our governor? He's famous, isn't he? Around the world, people know him. I just spoke in Norway and I said, you know, who is the governor of California? Of course, everybody knows him. So I've written him a letter to see, you know, he has the power. The governor has the power to commute a prisoner's sentence. Commute means to forgive. So he can forgive Tony and release him. The President of the United States has that power, and the governor. But I'm not having much success, I have to say. And I got a letter back from him, but it was just a standard letter. But a good friend of mine is a good friend with Maria Shriver. Who's Maria Shriver? Do you know who Maria Shriver is? Tell us. Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife, the First Lady of California, right? So I'm hoping that I get a meeting with Maria Shriver, and maybe she can convince her husband.
She
That's
has
the
a lot of
hope.
clout without him.
But,
She has a lot of clout without him.
yes, hopefully. But I think that, yes, he will come out. I tell you why. Because the foundation is doing more and more every year. I remember I started the Tariq Kamisa Foundation in my house. Very little money. I think we had $4,000 or $5,000. Today, we have a nice office, and you're welcome to take them there on a field trip, and they would love to meet you all. We have 10 people on staff now. And we are doing a school pretty much every week. I speak at a lot of schools. And as the foundation gets more founded and doing more work, you know, we can put pressure on the governor to release Tony. That's my hope. Yes?
One of the students, George, last week said, you know, how do you handle every time you think about him? Is it always forgiveness that comes into your head, or do you ever think of anger or resentment?
No, I never was angry. You know, I meditate 2 hours a day. I used to do an hour a day. And I can tell you, and I went to some pretty good schools. I was educated in England. Actually, I was born in Africa. I was born in Kenya. My roots are Indian and Persian, but I grew up in Kenya. I went to England. some very good schools in England. And I talk about this, and even though I have very good education, it was pretty useless for me to deal with my son's life. What helped me was a strong spiritual foundation. And I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. The biological functions changed. But I could meditate. It's the only way I could connect with my son. And I still do that now. So now I do 2 hours a day, and I also teach meditation as a way to connect. Because we all have this, what I call an internal navigation system. When we are born, we are all born with a soul, right? In our souls, you know what is right and what is wrong. Right? You know, lying isn't good, stealing isn't good, killing somebody isn't good. It's not something you have to be taught, it's part of you, but you have to be connected. But most of these kids that join gangs don't have that internal navigation system. Their navigation system is external. Now, Tony is a good example. His navigation system was Antoine. Right? Antoine told him, bust him bones. That was the navigation system, that he was connected with his internal navigation system. He would not have made that choice. So we teach the importance of having a spiritual belief. So I was lucky. I met, my mom was very spiritual. My dad was a businessman. So I grew up with equal emphasis. And I met a very good friend of my mom when I was 20 years old. And he taught me how to meditate. And that's really has saved me. So every time I do this, it hurts, because it's like taking the scab off the wound. And if you've done that, it's painful. But it's also healing, because when the scab reforms, it's a little smaller than the one you took out. So, I can't bring my son back, but I can at least save other kids from having to suffer the same. And that's what this work is all about, really. It's kind of work you do, Yes?
What happens to Antoine?
Yes, good question. Now, Antoine, there were 4 kids: Antoine, Solomon, Hakim, and Tony. Antoine killed a homeless person in December. And he planned the murder of my son in January. He killed this homeless person by a 7-Eleven store. Sure. For no reason. The only reason is he wanted his homeboys to know that he was somebody they had to fear. That if they didn't obey him, he could do the same to them. So he was tried for 2 murders. Homeless person, and for masterminding the tragedy that involved my son. So he got 2 life sentences without parole. 18 years old. So he only gets out when he dies. So he could be 80-something years old. He's 18 years old. Solomon and Hakim were both 14. Tony went to adult prison. He was the first 14-year-old in the state of California to be sent to an adult prison. First 14-year-old. So there was a lot of media around this. The other 2 guys went to juvenile prison. Do you know the difference there?
Yeah.
Tell me the difference between the juvenile system and the adult system.
Me?
Different places.
No, I was talking to her. Again?
It's different places, like a lot different.
But do you know why they would try a 14-year-old in an adult
Because
prison?
then they just passed that law that like, I forget.
They just passed the law, you're right, January 1st when they passed the law. When they reduced the age from 16 to 14, where a youth can be tried as an adult. But why do they want to try a 14-year-old as an adult? What's the reason for that?
So as much people won't kill people or something, minors.
That's, yeah, that's one of the reasons. But you know the main reason why they do that? Who knows that? Let me tell you the main reason. When you're in the juvenile system, right? Even if you murder somebody, when you're 25, you're released. Did everybody get that? The reason they want you to, in the adult system, is when you go to adult, then they can put you away for your life. Now, the law used to be you had to be under 16 to go to juvenile, and they changed that law and made it 14. January 1st of 1995, they reduced it from 16 to 14. And Tony was the first 14-year-old to go to adult prison because they wanted to put him away for life, right? If they sent him to juvenile prison, they could only sentence him till when? 95. 25 years released. So Hakim and Solomon went to juvenile prison. They were also 14. And that happened 13 years ago, so how old are they now?
27.
27. So they got out at 25. Hakim stole a car with a gun as soon as he came out. So they gave him 15 years for stealing the car, and they added another 10 years. Yes, because of the gun. You don't have to fire a gun in California. They catch you with a gun, they automatically add 10 more years. So he's now back in prison for 25 years for stealing a car. Solomon fortunately learned his lesson. His father's name is Lewis. I remember when I met Lewis Simpson, because Ples knew them because these were Tony's, friends. So he knew Hakim and Solomon's father. And Solomon called, Ples called me and says, Solomon's dad, Lewis, wants to meet you. And I said, fine, let's go have some soul food. And we went to a restaurant and had some soul food. And I remember when we met, Ples, Lewis, and me, he didn't eat anything. He just cried. He says, how can you meet me when my son was involved in the murder of your son? He was just so moved. He just cried the entire time. Touch and more so. But he's a recovering alcoholic, Lewis is. So he's helping kids that have problems with alcohol and substance abuse. And Solomon now helps his father. So I think we saved Solomon. We couldn't save Antoine. We couldn't save Hakim. And I know we have saved Tony. Okay, more questions? Yes.
Tony went to prison. Like, where did they put him since he was only 14?
So where did he go to prison at the age of 14?
Where do they
Like,
put him?
was he with everybody else?
He went to juvenile hall first at 14. As soon as he turned 16, they transferred him to New Folsom. So he served in juvenile prison for 2 years. That's a dangerous place. For a young, good-looking man in adult prison, it's very complicated. And I know his grandfather worries about him a lot. Prisons are really very violent. It's like a zoo. All right. So who has forgiven somebody here? So how do you forgive? Where do you find your forgiveness? In your heart. So I want to invite you all today to think about that, okay? We all have a heart. And I want you today to consider when you go home, after you do your homework.
We don't get homework.
I used to hate homework too. You don't get homework?
No.
Yeah. What's that? You're lucky. I used to get homework too. But after you've done your chores, after you go to dinner and you go to bed, I want to invite you all to close your eyes and look into your hearts. Okay? Look into your heart. Sometimes what happens is, somebody said bad things to you in school, or somebody said bad things to you at home, or while you're playing around, and you get angry. And I know Tony was very angry. I work very hard at not getting angry. I think it's a very good thing to learn. Forgiveness is a great thing to learn. And I keep a very peaceful center because I can forgive. I I want you to look into your hearts and see if you can find forgiveness. Dig around. And it's not, it's not important just to find it. I get up every morning, I pray, I meditate, and I forgive Tony. I've been doing that now for almost 13 years. So my forgiveness muscle is something I practice every single day. It's very strong because I practice it. So I want to encourage you all, and then I want to encourage you to use it. And there are many opportunities right here in school, at home, in your community. There are many opportunities. Use it. Clarence is as close to me as my brother. He would do anything for me. How many of you would like friends that would do anything for you? Huh? They would be with you. Clarence will be with me for the rest of my life, right? He's like a brother. Like, do you think he would be that way if I wanted revenge? No. That friendship was born because of forgiveness. And if you can learn to forgive, first it's good for you. Because you'll feel peace in your hearts first, okay? 2, it will improve the relationship you have with your families, with your siblings, with your teachers, with your community. And I truly believe if there are enough forgiving people in this world, we can get rid of violence and we can get rid of wars and we can live in peace. So I want you all to practice because really it's good for you first. It's good for your families. It's really good for your community and it's very good for our world because we can get to peace through forgiveness, not through revenge. Because all that happens in revenge is another person dying. You know, Gandhi used to say, an eye for an eye, and soon the whole world is blind. Does that make sense? How many are going to practice forgiveness? Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.